This is massive. Dr. Phil tells View hosts about horrific fates for some migrant children at the southern border. I don't know if you guys saw this. He appeared on Rogan. He was talking about how he interviewed CBP, and they outright told him that U.S. tax dollars are used to facilitate the sex trafficking of children, that Customs and Border Patrol agents are taking child victims. You are paying them to do it, and they are facilitating the transport. I want to stress this, that Customs and Border Protection are facilitating the transport of child sex trafficking victims to their abusers. And Dr. Phil is on The View, and he's like, yeah, it's happening. And they're like,
Wow.
Yep.
Dr. Phil has entered the chat.
That's what I was saying. What I said this downstairs. Well, what happened to Dr. Phil? Dr. Phil took the red pill all of a sudden, man. And he's really, he was just the same thing. He was talking about the COVID shots and the side effects from that too. So this is crazy.
He said, quote, I talked to the head of all the border guards down there, the head of the union. I asked him straight up, kids are coming over the border with numbers written on them, phone numbers and addresses. Do we check those out? Is it, he said, well, we call them. Is it possible that we're sending them into known prostitution rings or sweatshops? He said, it's not possible. It is absolute.
Absolutely.
We are using American tax dollars to ship children into known prostitution and sweatshops. And the funny thing is, when Donald Trump's administration says we got to figure out if these kids are sex trafficking victims, children,
Yep.
and whether or not that man with that little girl is his parent or not, the left screamed, oh, he's separating families. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, these are the same leftists who are cheering for adult graphic content in schools. It makes you wonder about what their true intentions are.
Yeah. It's the same people that had a problem with, I just drew a blank. The movie, A Sound of Freedom, that said it was right-wing,
The anti-human trafficking
conspiracy
movie
theory.
is
the same
The
people.
anti-child trafficking movie is evil.
The same people who claimed the Epstein story was a conspiracy.
Yeah.
Amazing.
The same one. Well, why? Why are they saying this? Because there's so many people that are complicit in it. That's why they're doing it.
It's totally crazy. I mean, I'm glad to have sort of mainstream figures like Dr. Phil talking about this issue. That it's so interesting to me that so many people are waking up to the dangers of the border and that they're willing to say, hey, this is a problem, we should confront it, rather than be lulled into silence by the idea of like you might be racist or something like that. I a couple months ago, I can't remember who it was, I think it was Nikki Haley, got endorsed by Judge Judy. And she, people are like, look, she's been in everyone's living room. These television figures, people are very used to them. They do have a serious following. So to have someone like Dr. Phil say, hey, we are actually putting children who are extremely vulnerable, especially if they're if they're being sent across the border alone, or if they're being brought across the border with a pedophile, effectively.
Yeah.
They need our protection more than anyone else. And by not protecting them, we are failing on so many levels.
Well, I think people will, yeah. But one, my question is, Dr. Phil, he got to start on Oprah, right? Isn't that how he got to start? So Dr. Phil has been in with the elites of the elites for a long time, right? Mm-hmm. So one question.
But he really is like a licensed, I should look it up, but I think he really is like a licensed therapist.
Yeah, but this is just how my brain works sometimes. Is my question is, did Dr. Phil like really not know that things like this were going on, and he light bulb just went off?
Or is it so mainstream now he's willing to talk about it?
Well, look, props to Dr. Phil for actually.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But it is absolutely fascinating that if you're on the quote unquote right, you're 6 months ahead of the news.
Yeah.
Now, how is that? It's just so weird, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, we don't. As you point out, echo chamber. We don't have our heads in the sand across the board. But the child sex trafficking thing, I have so many friends that have charity organizations that go out and rescue these children in not only this country, but other countries as well. You would be amazed the amount of parents that are involved in all this stuff. And then, so if parents are involved in it, for you to tell me that CBP is involved with it too, I absolutely believe that's true. Well, 100%.
Well, CBP is involved in it. It's it's an issue of, I don't think the CBP guys are going, let's call our cartel buddies and sell children. They're going, my boss wants me to take the kids from the smugglers.
They're just following orders. Yep. Yeah. Following orders blindly. And, no matter what oath you take, says you will follow orders unless they go to a certain level, kind of thing. Morally, ethically, all this other kind of stuff.
I don't understand how you don't have red states. Like, look, there's a CBP facility down the road here on 340.
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah, coming in.
If I was the governor of West Virginia, I would go to my AG and say, why are we not beginning a criminal investigation into the actions taken by this federal agency right now? They're operating in our state. And even at this point now, it's like, look, Dr. Phil has the head of the CBP union outright saying they're doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, at this point, we should see several large vehicles of heavily armored and ready to go state police force with a warrant pulling up to CBP in West Virginia saying, we're going to go through all your records, we're going to go through all your training, and we are going to start investigating the claims of human trafficking facilitated by CBP. But they won't do it.
Well, they're too busy. Now they're going after January 6 people that were even remotely in the vicinity of it.
Yeah,
like
and
Steve
people,
Baker, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, was there an update on him, on his case?
They ordered him to turn himself in, but from what I read about it
Recently?
Over the weekend. Dallas, though, this guy, it happened in DC. He's a resident of North Carolina, but because he works for the Blaze, which is based out of the Dallas area, that's where he's supposed to surrender to the FBI. Again, this is not, I haven't read everything about it, but like, you're telling me that he's being persecuted for being a journalist. That's what that means. Not as a private citizen, and not for for a crime that happened in DC, but because he is a journalist.
Well, the powers that be, of course, that's more important because, as I said, they are complicit in what's going on in this child sex trafficking ring. I don't know the numbers right off of my head, but it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? Child sex trafficking worldwide.
Yeah.
Of course,
Freedom was talking about it.
Of course, people are trying to hush that and make that go away. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Because evil is real. Evil really does happen. And then when evil also makes money while they do it, there's going to be a lot of people that try to defend it and keep it going for forever.
Yeah. It's just crazy. I just think that the conversations about the border, like not talking about the effect of illegal immigration in our country, not talking about having strong border policy, open the door for this to happen and allowed it to stay open for longer. Like, it is imperative, in my opinion, that people talk about this issue, both because it stops human trafficking, but also because it stops, I feel obligated to mention Laken Riley, the nursing student who was murdered on the University of Georgia campus, right? And it turns out that the person who was arrested not even 24 hours after she was found dead with visible injuries was an illegal immigrant who had been arrested not just in 2023 in New York, but in 2022 after being detained. And then he was released. He was paroled and let into the country, even though they knew he had entered illegally.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we harm the children who are trafficked into our country for nefarious reasons, but we also harm American children who are in this country just trying to become nurses and do all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's wild to me that we don't take this more seriously, or that it's taken this long for it to be a mainstream conversation.
Yeah. I said we have a charity. My wife runs a charity of ours that is centered around this entire thing. People that are victims of sexual assault or sex trafficking, and prevention of sexual assault or sex trafficking and things like that. And you would be amazed how A, rampant it is, and how B, people do not give a flying crap about it at all.
When did you guys start this?
It's at the 2-year mark now.
Wow.
Yeah. It's called the Asher House, and my wife, she's a rock star. She runs it and everything, and it is insane just here in America how many a lot of these people have been on the street since they were 12 years old, but you've got 16 to 22-year-olds running around the street in a town near you. They don't have a birth certificate. They don't have a social security card. They don't have a driver's license. They don't have a job. They're sleeping under bridges, and that's prime people that these human traffickers, these sex traffickers, they go after those individuals, the vulnerable, for that reason. And a lot of it is drug related and things like that. I mean, it is absolutely, it makes you see the evil that is really here, and it's really hard to deal with, for sure.
Right. Because they're people who have no record, and so they're easily removed from society.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
Why would this?
They can't even go get a job because they don't even have an ID to
No.
go, apply for a job.
I remember probably like 6 months ago at this point, I was writing a story about a meat processing company that had been hit with a fine because of child labor, and they were bringing teenagers in to clean all of the machines, exposure to intense chemicals. They're also working at night. Also, it's like not a condition children are supposed to be working in the U.S. And one of the things that came out was that all of these children are actually undocumented. Right? They're all teenagers. They're not like toddlers who are coming in to do this. But one of the reasons that they're able to take this kind of work is because there's no way to ensure protections against them unless you get these kind of investigations. And I think that that's one of these strange things where we're saying, well, it's okay if it happens to these children who come across the border, because that means we're not doing it, or this company's not paying for someone to do this job legally. Like, people who are undocumented are also victims of crimes because we don't protect minors.
Yeah. Well, the pushback will be, well, if we don't let them in, then they're just going to be sexually abused in Mexico. But
so it's better if they're sexually abused.
But there's a difference between bad things happening in other countries and our country being complicit in it happening here.
Right.
There's a big difference there.
Yeah, the border, man. We should really close that.
We should really close that. Yeah, I mean, you know.
Do you feel like people?
I've heard it works.
Do you feel like in your experience, like being out in media and stuff, the conversation around our illegal immigration problem or our border crisis has changed, like in the decade you've been doing this?
Maybe. The people that are adamant that, hey, if you're bleeding out, right, what's the first thing you're supposed to do? You got to stop the bleed, figure out why you're bleeding.
Yeah.
And then you can really dissect and figure out what's going on, right? If you're having a seizure, what's the first thing you got to do? You got to deal with that seizure, and then you figure out why the seizure happened in the first place. We're bleeding out right now. From any perspective that you look at this, like if there's a hole in the boat and you're in the middle of the ocean, what's the first thing you got to do? You got to stop the water from coming in the boat, and then you can figure out, okay, how do we get the boat out of the water now?
Right.
We have to shut the thing down. But here's the problem. Nobody wants to put the time, energy, money, effort in currently in control of making those decisions that it would take to actually do that.
Right.
We need a hard reset. And most people don't want to have to deal with that because of the amount of money, the amount of time, the amount of energy. I was a proponent when the government was about to shut down. Let it shut down, because nothing will make them fix crap faster than everybody being pissed at them and protesting in DC because the government shut down and nobody can get all this other kind of stuff. And you would also be amazed how many people still get a check that are federal employees even when the government shuts down. It's amazing how that works out.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.